What's up guys, Spencer here for Ski Repairs. It's been a while since I made content for the channel. I've been a little bit busy with work, but that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. This is our new shop truck. This is a 1996 Daihatsu Midget II. It's base model of the base model. 4-speed manual crank, and no accessories. We're going to get this thing roadworthy, get it really up and going so we can put some nice vinyl on the side, get some company advertising. We're going to tour this thing around town as a nice little parts truck and advertising truck. What we're going to be doing today is, as you can see right here, we're missing a little something important. Nowadays, if you're driving to and from customers' houses or to and from the stores, we almost always have a GPS to help us with the way roads change and construction. We always want to make sure we're going the right way. So what I've got today is we're actually going to try and do a little bit of a dash cutout and install one of these bad boys. This is a Soundstream. The model number is VRCA172W. This is a nice little single-DIN Android Auto unit that's going to fit right there. Now this car doesn't have any factory wiring down there, so we're going to have to do some custom wiring. It's going to be a good opportunity to show you guys how you might do that in a car, and we've also got to do a cutout there in the dash. Without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and get this dash, this column cover off. It's just going to be held on by 6 Phillips screws. So it's going to be 2 here, 4 down here. And what that's going to do is that's going to get us a little bit more access to this wiring right here. Because there's no factory harness for a radio installed on this vehicle, we are going to have to splice into the factory harness. We're going to try and do that as professionally as possible, make it as clean as possible so we're not having any issues in the end, or 4 or 5 years down the line. These are JIS screws. I am not using a JIS screwdriver because they are basically the same thing, but not. As long as you're careful with them, you're not going to strip them out. With the screws removed, all you have to do is pop that down. Just little kind of like hooks on the side. You're going to be gentle with that and put it out of the way. If this breaks, I will probably never find another one. This is an import vehicle that was never sold in the US, so parts for it are a little scarce. And the other thing that is very scarce is actually information. This right here is our harnesses, and what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to trace these harnesses and pretty much figure out what goes where. There's going to be a few things we need. We're going to need constant power, key on signal, an illumination signal when the lights are turned on. Lights are on this side. And a ground. Now, there is a ground up under the dash right here that we're going to tee off of. But for everything else, we're going to have to get a meter and figure out just where it goes. All right. I've got my meter. Don't know if y'all are going to be able to see that. And I've also got keys for the car. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the key in the ignition. And we're going to check a few things first. So there's a beeper here. Very annoying. So we're going to turn the key on. Okay. And now we should have power everywhere. So I'm going to turn on the voltage, DC, and we're just going to check a few things. I've got a ground here in the door. I'm going to put my negative probe of the meter right here on this ground, the door strap, and I'm just going to stick this where it don't belong. Find 12 volts. 12 volts on the white, 12 volts on the, 12 volts on the blue, 12 volts on the black, and 12 volts on the black and yellow. Turn the key completely off. 12 volts on the white, Nothing on blue, nothing on black, nothing on black and yellow. White is our constant hot, so with white being our constant hot, we're going to follow this down to here. That gets us white right there, and that white's going to be our constant 12-volt power. Going to turn the key on. Key is now on, and we have voltage on blue, voltage on black, and voltage on black and yellow. One of those is going to be accessory, one of those is just going to be something else. So that goes all the way up there. So another connector coming off here of some green. The green goes to start. What I'm going to do real quick is I'm pretty sure start is going to be black and white, so we're not going to worry about that. Next thing I need to figure out is going to be in this harness here with illumination. But for the time being, I'm just worried about power and key on, which I'm going to say key on is going to be the blue. Awesome. Let's go ahead and get the harness for the radio out of the box and go from there. Alright, I've got the harness for the radio right here. I've actually already separated the wires we're going to be using. These are the unused ones, stuff like steering wheel controls or extra speakers. This car doesn't actually have speakers in it, so we are actually going to add one more speaker right there. That speaker is going to be our only speaker. Go ahead and turn that off. And maybe one day we'll think about adding a kicker powered unit right there or hideaway behind the seat right here, whichever fits better or when time comes. The wires we're going to be looking at for today, however, is going to be this right here, ground wire. We have our battery 12 volt, our accessory power one, our headlights, and then the front left speaker wires. These are going to be the wires that go to our speaker. Right here I actually have the mounting cage for the radio. What we're going to do first, before we actually get into the wiring, is we're going to figure out how much we have to cut, how much we have to cut to get this in there. Now we are going to cut a decent amount, I can tell, and in fact we're probably going to have to overcut it and do an adapter of some sort, but we can get that all figured out as we go in. So let's go ahead and get a razor blade or something and start cutting probably the bare minimum around that to open that up for our radio. Alright, so trimming this is actually going to be like pretty easy. It's going to take, I need to stop doing that first off. It's going to take a really sharp razor blade and ride the cubby as much as possible. I would rather cut less and have to sand it than cut too much. Ultimately what we're probably going to have to do anyway is go and 3D print a bracket or an adapter that's going to cover most of the excess cutaway, but that's easy enough because it's going to be a square shape. And in fact what we might end up doing is actually 3D printing a whole plate, and that goes over this part of the dash. Makes it a nice factory looking finish. Really just want to take your time with this. Once it's cut, you're not going back on. Sorry, all you guys are seeing is my hand right now. But that is that side done. Right there. There's a little bit of marring going on, so we're definitely going to do some kind of cover. I think the radio bezel is fairly aggressive. I keep doing that. It's such a soft thing, and I'm resting my arm against it, but just going to keep going. Upsy daisy, upsy daisy. Keeping in mind to cut as little as possible. Now, a lot of the midgets you find on the used market will already have a radio installed. So if you're looking to do it specifically on a midget, you really don't need to worry about this part here. In fact, you could probably get away with just doing a harness swap or fixing the plugs on the old radio There we go. Bottom is loose. So we're just gonna cut the top now. There we go. Then we just gotta tie the corners in. That's that guy. That's that guy. And that's that guy. A little bit too much of a cut there, but that's fine. And that is our cubby for a radio cut out. And we have a nice little cup holder. Just to see how far over, because I know it's going to be over. Yeah, that is aggressively over. But that's okay because we can fix that. We can absolutely fix that. In fact, this bracket actually has these little bend tabs that you're meant to bend out to secure it to a dash once you've done that. I wonder how secure I can actually get it. Using these tabs here. Oh, no. The answer is going to immediately be not enough. Yeah, no problem. Alright, we're going to bend this back flat. They don't work in this setup. But alright, that is that cut. I'm going to get dial calipers. We're going to make a measurement and see what we got to do from there. Alright, so we're actually here the next day. Nice, beautiful, cool morning. You can see went a little bit different. I was originally going to measure and try and model this myself, but my dad actually stepped in and was a real hero, and he actually already have a bracket made. He came out all through the night doing a bunch of test fits and stuff, and it is pretty damn close. Now we have nubs on the back of it for mounting. You can see it fits the dash perfectly. We have little nubs back here for mounting. We're gonna have to get these holes a little bit kind of fit better. They are only really lining up in the corner right now, but I probably drilled the holes a little bit crooked and they are a tight fit. I drilled a 3/8 hole, they're 3/8 pegs, and a little deformation is going to be normal there. What I'm actually going to do now to actually fix that, and we're going to do the radio or the speaker at the same time, is we're actually going to remove the dashboard of this car. Now the dashboard on these is real easy. There's a JS screw there, or basically just a Phillips. There's a 10 mil right here, and then underneath here there's another 10 mil right there, and then the dash lifts off. The only thing we're going to have to unscrew component wise is going to be this, because there's a speedometer cable, but that should just pop out or pop back once we do. I'm going to go ahead and get working on that, kind of show you guys the whole process of getting this dash out, and then once the dash is out, we'll work on getting the speaker mounted and get that permanently installed. one more Phillips screw right on this side. And then that is this section disconnected. And with this section disconnected, we can see where that speaker needs to go. This looks like about a 4-inch speaker spot. I actually got a 3.5-inch speaker for it. Whichever speaker, that's your choice. 3.5 inch is going to work fine for me. I didn't want too much with the speaker blocked and rattling on the inside of the dash. I'm going to actually put some, just like a really basic sound deadening right here. Maybe just some foam. I'm not entirely set on that, but we'll see how it goes and go from there. I'm getting this one out now. It's just going to be Phillips screw right there. And this will actually probably be a good time to clean behind here too, just because it's all going to be exposed. And brake fluid cap has to come off. Could probably flush that brake fluid. Not the cleanest looking. Now for the speedo. Looks like they're just screws on the bottom. There are 2 Phillips screws on the bottom of the speedometer. Let's see if taking them out gives us enough removal ability. There's one. And then it's the other one from this side probably. Oh. And that screw is out. Is there one more up top? Yes, there is one more screw up top. We can go in through this little cutout we actually made. Ooh, that's actually really tight. Actually, I'm gonna go get a special tool and then we'll be able to get that out. Now I've got a 1/4 inch ratchet with a Phillips bit, and it'd probably be good to come out on this side because once the radio is installed, it's not really going to want to come in on this other side. But all I want to do is get this bit and this screw. It's actually pretty hard to see in there.
I'm actually partially wondering if it'd just be easier to
remove the speedo cable. Let me go get a pop-out tool for that. Got this little pick. There are fingers on this cable.
Yep, that was easier. All right, don't bother unscrewing the gauge, just unplug it. It's not that bad to unplug. Now I've still got a connector somewhere. Oh, heater. Wait, here. Disconnect that, and there goes our dash. A little bit of fuzz and dust and insulation in there. And this gives us a huge view for the wiring harness, so we're probably going to keep this off until we get the radio in. There's where that connector goes for that. Be careful with the connector going back in for the dash. It does look like there's some ribbon grounds there for the actual bulbs and everything. Definitely want to be gentle with those. If you break that, you're probably not going to find another one on a vehicle like this. Now I'm going to put this down. And what I'm going to do is get my two tiny screws back. And we're just going to screw back in this gauge cluster. I'm also going to put the cap back on the brake fluid. Now would be a good time to maybe try and clean that reservoir. It looks pretty clean for being 30 years old. I know this fluid's never been opened. It's real tender with it. Old plastic brakes. So you just gotta keep that in mind. And now we have a dash out. And when I go back together, I'm actually gonna grease this speedo cable a little bit more, keep it nice and lubed, and then right now let's clean it up a bit and get our faceplate installed. So the holes we drilled here were 3/8, just because we made 3/8 studs on the back of this plate. What's happening on this plate is, trying to do it with one hand, is the studs aren't quite lined up with the factory bolt temples. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get these holes a little bit bigger. That'll actually give us adjustment room for the front too. I'm going to do a, I think I grabbed a 27/64 bit. Just going to center it. The holes I already made. Just like this. Nice and slow. Using an impact drill, always sketchy. But I'm actually going to hold this with two hands and then I'll show you the end result. Alright, there's our end result with everything widened. I'm going to go ahead and lean this back like that. Try and get this cover in, see if I did it enough. I definitely drilled those holes off center, and that's where my issues are coming from. Which, yeah. Just a little wider still. Bottom needs to be cleared out on that one. I think I might just take a file and file that out now, just because the holes are getting a little too big. Just because I tried drilling it before taking the dash off. I shouldn't have done that. I should have drilled it once the dash was off. But learn from your mistakes. We're gonna get a little bit of file, sand that out, and then we'll go ahead and get this mounted. Alright, it took a little bit of filing, but we are nice and in, and look at how flush that is. It's going to squeeze in a little bit once we screw it in, and that'll keep it nice and even. There's a little bit right here, but honestly, that is absolutely perfect. I'll show you what the back looks like. It's not screwed in yet, but you can see they're in. They're a little tight against the edges still. I did drill those holes a little off center, like I mentioned, but we're going to go ahead and get this mounted now. What we're using to mount it is just going to be 4 little machine screws. There are tiny little pilot holes in those nubs, and then we're going to use these little backing plates. And these backing plates are a really clever solution Dad came up with, and what these backing plates are actually going to do is there's these molding flashes right here, and it's actually going to keep pressure on that and act as a support for them. And it's going to use those screws to pull it in. Now I would like to have some washers. I don't actually have any right now, so we're going to try and see how it does without washers. I think it should be pretty good. And then once this is all wrapped up, we'll get this dash put back in. Well, no, we're actually going to do the wiring before we get the dash in. Figure out what we're going to do there. There's that ground I mentioned earlier. We're going to come over here to where this is. This looks like a reusable zip tie, which is very nice of Daihatsu to use back in the 90s. This is our dashboard connector, so our gauge cluster connector, sorry, a little bit of a brain fart there. And we're gonna go through this wire. We're gonna figure out which one of these is headlights on. We're gonna figure out accessory, constant power, which constant power we're gonna steal off the ignition switch. Same with the accessory, and we'll go from there. Now I have the other piece of the dash over here. And we're going to work on getting that speaker mounted too. We're going to have to make an adapter that goes from that bracket hole, that little pilot right there, to that pilot right there, and it's going to hold that speaker right there. I'm going to go ahead and get this screwed in, and we'll see how it works. Alright, we are all mounted up. Little plates, some screws. I did put one washer on that one just because that corner has some tension under it. But we are all solid and secure, as ready to slide the radio in. That is a perfect fit. It's going to look so good once it's all back installed. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start getting a look at this wiring. Now, I do not have multicolored wire. The wire I have is marine wire. It's tinned and well insulated, but it's also not the same gauge. So what we're going to end up doing is just trying our best to organize it. The connector for the radio, wherever it is it may be right now, did have a label on each wire. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave those labels on the wires. That way in the future, if anyone other than me is looking at this car and wants to figure out what the heck each wire is going to, what it's doing, they'll be able to look at the label and figure it out. Got the removable zip tie off. We're going to go ahead and start getting to work on pinning our connections. I know white is always hot. I know blue is always hot, or blue is accessory on. One of these is a ground. I would rather do a chassis ground right there. So that's what I'm going to do. Some of these wires do actually go over into here. In fact, I think they all might go there. Does this go? Yes. All of the wires go over there. There's also some accessory wires right here. I'm not quite sure what those are for, but those are the only dummy connectors we have in the car. Going over here, it might make more sense to do our cuts there to minimize how much wire we're having to run, but this is definitely an easier spot. In fact, actually, I am just gonna run like 1.5 feet of wire per here. I should need just the 4 wires and we'll be good. I'm gonna go ahead and cut up some wire. It is all gonna be the same color, but once again, the labels will be good. Once I get all that wire sorted, we'll start the cutting. The fun cutting. Very stressful. I always hate cutting factory harnesses, but there's no radio connector on here, so we gotta just kind of do it. All right, let's get to work. Now I've got all my stuff right here. What I'm going to start by doing is, of course, crimping all my connections I'm going to use. I use these automatic crimpers. They're from Nipex. There are plenty of knockoffs you can get. I've had a couple of the different knockoffs and I was not too impressed with them. They repeatedly broke. So I bought this Nipex set and I've had them for about 4 years. They get used maybe once or twice a week and they have been pretty great in that time. And like I mentioned before, I don't really have multicolored wire. It's pretty hard to stock wires that
have all this nonsense they put on these factory colors. I am going to just be using generic brown. I believe this is 20 gauge for everything. And I'm just going to get this off. We got to set up the radio side first, and then we'll worry about cutting into the main harness. So what I'm going to do is one at a time with these leads. These leads are about 1.5 to 2 feet long. Plenty to get us around there. We'll cut the trim once we get there, but I cut 4 up. I actually don't even need one that long because one of these is going to be the ground. But I'm going to cut this, or twist them all first before cutting or anything. And then I'm going to actually trim these. These are kind of too long. I'm going to trim them in half outside the car so I'm not cleaning up copper wire. And there we go. Nice and stubby little wires. These are the speaker connections. We're going to run some completely incorrect speaker wires. I have some 16 gauge speaker wire that's going to be way too big for what we're doing, but it is going to work. Rather that than just using not shielded wire. Even though this section here is not shielded, there's going to be interference, but it's completely overkill for what we're doing here. The types of crimps I like to use for these jobs is just your standard eBay or Amazon non-insulated butt connectors. The reason I prefer non-insulated, we're actually gonna try and find the right size for what we're doing here, is I prefer non-insulated because I like to use glue-lined heat shrink. Because I work on boats. That should be perfect. And then what I'm going to do first is grab my crimp pliers. These are my crimp pliers here. I'm going to use the insulated, the non-insulated crimp side. Line it up and give it a squeeze. Good squeeze. And what that's also going to do is that's going to hold the insulation too, so we're not really worrying about any loose connections down the line. Give it a secondary crimp right there. Nice and simple. And that has that wire held. Then I'm going to start with the ground, because why not? I'm going to get the ground in there and hold the wire in like that. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. Always wish you had 3 hands. Just going to hold it like that, get in the crimp, and squeeze down like you're trying to strangle it. You'll feel the pliers bottom out. This is a very cheap pair of Nipex knockoffs. Crimping and stuff, small stuff like this, I wouldn't sweat anything big, but that is one solid connection and that is never gonna fail. A lot of people swear by soldering wires and stuff in cars like this. If you look at a car, you'll never find a soldered connection except at the end point where the final wires go. Every single one of these connectors is crimped on just like this. There's nothing wrong with using crimps. All you have to do is insulate them properly, make sure they don't short, and you are doing just as good of a job as the factory. I'm gonna hurry up and I'm gonna crimp on some more of these, and once we are all crimped up, we will do our first round of heat shrink. Alright, we've got all of our crimping done for the connector side of this harness. What we're going to do now is, this is adhesive lined 4:1 ratio heat shrink. I believe this is a 1/4 inch. We're going to do 1.5 inch segments on it. Just enough to cover the insulator, or insulates the thing. I'm going to need 6 of them because we did the speaker wires. Now you can buy this stuff online. This stuff's pretty hard to find in stores. There's a company called like the Heat Shrink Company. It's usually where I buy my bulk stock from. I use this stuff all the time doing marine wiring repairs, even stuff like on underside of trucks, doing accessories, or doing anything around water or anything that might get dirty or muddy. This stuff is amazing. So I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna do these one at a time. Just gonna get it on the end of the wire, run it all through, get it to where that crimp is, and let me go grab some heat. All right, I've got just a standard lighter. What I'm gonna do is try to center this tape on this crimp right here, and I'm gonna start on one end. Try not to burn yourself when doing this. It is very easy to burn yourself doing this kind of stuff. Always keep the flame on the heat shrink. You'll melt a wire otherwise. This 4:1 stuff is great, but it does have to get pretty hot to shrink. And that side's done. The way you can tell, and I'll show you here in a second, is you'll see the glue kind of push out. And I'm melting this one a little bit, but that's okay. And when I say these are adhesive lined, that's what I mean. You can see kind of on the end there is hot glue basically coming out. That's what actually seals the crimp and prevents absolutely all moisture from ever touching it. There's no way for that to ever get corrosion on it with that adhesive line stuff. You would have to have basically missed an entire section for that glue to not hold. It is some of the best stuff ever. Highly recommend it if you're doing any crimping connections in general, especially if you're doing any crimping connections around outdoor use or heavy duty stuff. It is just a life-changing difference. You don't have to go back every couple of years and redo it. the insulation's still in good shape, and all got glue showing. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take all of these but the ground, because the ground's gonna stay over in this corner. And basically it's gonna sit right here. Right here. So we need to, I'm gonna do some small little wrap of electrical tape right there. I'm actually gonna include the ground in that. A small little wrap of electrical tape right there. Then we're gonna go ahead and route it with the actual harness. We'll get our ends right here, and then we'll start doing our cutting and trimming. We're gonna be looking at that blue and the white, and then we need to figure out which one of these is going to be our light switch. All right. Now we start the slightly daunting part of making sure everything goes to the right place. This is also where we see the downsides of everything being the same color. So what we have to do is basically play tug of war with the harness a little bit. And this guy here is battery voltage. This guy here is illumination. And this guy here has to be accessory because it's the last one. So illumination, we'll stuff in the corner. And we'll do battery voltage first. First things first, we know battery voltage is on white. So let's get the harness out of the way. Let's get the speedo cable out of the way. And we have to do what always sucks. And we have to cut white. What I'm going to do to get a better look at it is I'm going to try and unplug this connector. And white has a voltage. So we're going to do something a little bit interesting as how I'm going to connect these. And some people probably are going to be like, oh, that's dumb. Some people are probably going to be like, oh, that's smart. Some people are just going to be like, eh, that's a way to do it. Careful not to ground out on anything. Haha. And that is our 12 volt line. So I'm going to trim a little bit here. Yep. Right now this wire has nothing on it, so I don't mind if it touches anything. This guy here we have to be careful of. If he touches something, it will cause problems because the battery is still connected. That's probably a good tip. Don't do this with the battery connected. I'm experienced. I've done this a lot of times. I know more or less what I'm doing. There's always someone who's going to say I know less. But don't do this with the battery connected. So I have where my harness is going to go, I have right here. So that means this guy here is going to get cut right there. And now this guy is going to get trimmed the exact same amount as that. And then these guys are actually going to get wrapped together, and they're going to get crimped together. And this is where it'd be very good to not have the battery connected, because if I touch these pliers to this metal bar right here, it's probably going to catch on fire. I stuff them both in there. and crimp as hard as I can. What I'm going to do next, before I crimp the other end, is I'm going to measure out my 1.5 inches of heat shrink. I'm going to get this on this end. And then with this harness here, I'm going to connect that in there. Oh, be careful. Make sure we get all the wires. You don't typically want boogers sticking out, although there is a booger sticking out on the other end because we wrapped 2 wires together. Take that guy, and we're going to crimp him. Just like that. Give him a good old tug test. Nothing coming out, nothing loose, everything firm. And we're going to slide this heat shrink over, and what we're going to do with the heat shrink is this is another benefit of the glue-lined heat shrink, is that's actually going to seal and glue both these wires together even more. Alright, and I have glue coming out of both ends of the wire. That guy is done. That right there is 12 volts powering our radio harness. You might be asking why I didn't put a fuse in it or anything. The reason for that is the radio unit I have actually has an internal fuse. Typically, if there was a fuse spot in the fuse box here, I would wire it in, but the fuse box is pretty full. I do have an aftermarket fuse box because eventually I do plan on adding some powered accessories to this unit, and I plan to do one of those hot rod AC kits. I found one that it's got pretty good dimensions that should fit here, but for the time being, I am just really worried about this, so we're just going to use the fuse inside the radio. And the next thing is going to be this blue guy. It's not going to be any rush or any problem with the blue guy, because with the blue guy, he is our accessory on, which means he doesn't even have power right now. I'm going to do him the same. Slightest twist, that immediately came undone. Nice and secure. Once again, get the heat shrink ready. Stick it on the end, you can fit it. This one is a little tight. Go ahead and get the wires in. All right, and that, give it a tug test. That is not going anywhere. Pull that guy down. And then we gotta heat it. From the other side. This is why I like using like Bic lighters or just like any click lighter, because they're hot enough to do the heat shrink, but they're really not hot enough to melt unless you stay on it like way too long. But that is our power and accessory, signal wired. Next thing we need to figure out is going to be which one of, it's going to be this, on this big connector right here, which one of these is going to be our light switch. And it even could be this guy right here, actually. Yes, maybe. I don't, where does this wire go? That's not connected. Okay, it's just this guy coming out here. So one of these is going to be lights on, lights off. And it might be this red guy here, because that's a pretty big looking wire. So let's get the meter back out. Let's go get the key. And we'll see which one of those turns on with the lights on. All right, GoPro is getting hot out here in the sun, but we always got the phone on standby. We are all wired up. We're using the headlight power switch, the headlight power wire as our illumination signal. Put all our wires down here. Everything taped up here. We got the Pioneer whatever wired in, some kind of capacitor for sound quality, and then over here we got a nice ground lug wired up. We are ready to put the dash back on. I'm gonna move this GoPro out of the way, get this dash back on. It's just gonna be the reverse of removal, and I'm gonna add some grease right there, just some new silicone grease, and we will be good to put the radio in and see how this bad boy sounds. All right, we're here for the moment of truth. Everything is plugged in. Let's see if turning it on gives us power. Come to life. Oh, steering wheel's locked. Wrong. Oh, there we go. So pretty. We're gonna let it boot up. This is first time booting up. And look at that. This has camera wiring in the back. I don't have a camera for it. So that is beautiful. Let's Try and play some nondescript music and see what we can get going on. It's playing some royalty-free mix on YouTube. See if we can tune that speaker a little bit. I want super bass. I'll never not do that, I've determined. Turn the loudness on just to help. Ooh, big EQ. Maybe turn the loudness off because it was buzzing a bit. That's awesome. How's it sound with the door closed? Oh yeah. This is perfect. Never gonna stop. Never gonna stop. And got the working GPS and everything. Oh man. This was a success. Next thing I'm gonna work on, get this floor mat up, goes into all weather underneath it. Gonna vacuum all this out, and I'm gonna lay some satin ending. But that might be it for today. Or this time. We'll see if we make one big video. I think we're gonna split doing the company vinyl and the soundproofing all into one. Give this thing a nice wash and detail. And I've got an appointment Saturday to get a state inspection on it. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. See you next time.